Somewhere between the silence of a late evening and the stillness of a morning that comes too early, something begins to change. You stop chasing. Not because you've given up, not because you've run out of dreams, but because the noise that used to pull you forward, the race, the rewards, the recognition, just doesn't echo the same way anymore. You notice it in the little things first. The quiet no longer feels empty. The solitude begins to feel sacred. And the moments that used to pass unnoticed, like a stranger's smile, a sudden breeze, the way your coffee warms your hands, start to carry weight. After 50, life doesn't speed up, it deepens. And that depth comes with a question, one that doesn't shout but whispers in the spaces between conversations, in the soft loneliness after guests leave, in the long pauses of a phone that doesn't ring as often as it used to. Where do I belong now? For most of your life, you belonged somewhere. At work, in a family, inside a routine that gave shape to your days. There was always a reason to wake up, somewhere to be, someone to take care of. You were necessary, anchored, known. But slowly, those roles change. The job might not need you anymore. The children grow. The house, once filled with noise, now echoes. People move, or leave, or forget, and you find yourself in a strange in-between, still alive, still capable, but no longer central in the stories of others. It's not a crisis, it's a shift, but it can feel like grief, because even as the world tells you this is your time to rest, to relax, to enjoy, something in you knows that connection, not comfort, is what keeps a soul alive. And yet, making new connections at this age, it feels unnatural, forced, even awkward. Friendships, once formed in the playground or over shared responsibilities, now require effort, intention, vulnerability. And after so many years of building walls to protect yourself from disappointment, betrayal, or the exhaustion of giving too much, you may not know how to begin again. So you retreat, not out of weakness, but out of fatigue. You've carried so much for so long. But here's the quiet truth. The need for belonging doesn't retire when the body does. It grows louder, more urgent, and more refined. You no longer want crowds. You want resonance. You don't crave attention. You crave recognition, the kind that comes when someone sees you, not for what you've done, but for who you are beneath the titles and the timelines. This is when you begin to understand something no one taught you in your younger years. That a tribe is not made of people who look like you, or are your age, or share your history. It's made of those who speak your inner language, who carry the same questions, who sit with the same silences. Your tribe may not live next door. They may not have the same background, but they'll understand when you say, "Some days I feel invisible," or when you admit, "I miss being needed," or when you whisper, "I'm not done yet, but I don't know where to begin." The search for your people isn't about fitting in anymore. It's about coming alive. And that search begins, not out there, but within. Because first, you'll need to stop pretending. Stop pretending that you're fine with surface conversations, that hobbies are enough, that retirement is fulfilling, that you're content being alone all the time, that the ache you feel in your chest some nights is just age and not the weight of disconnection. Stop pretending you don't want more, because you do. Not more stuff, not more success, more soul, more mornings where you feel excited to get up because someone's waiting for you. More evenings where you feel seen without having to explain yourself. More moments where your presence matters, not out of obligation, but because someone genuinely lights up when you walk into the room. That's the hunger behind the shift. Not weakness, not loneliness, but longing for something real. So where do you begin? You begin by risking small moments of openness, by choosing to show up, not as the version of you that knows the answers, but as the one who still has questions. You try things that feel a little strange, a local class, a volunteer shift, an online discussion about something you've always loved but never explored, not because you're looking for friends, but because you're returning to your aliveness. You'll find them there, not all at once, and not in the places you expect. But over time, like constellations slowly revealing themselves in a night sky you didn't think would ever clear, they'll show up in conversations where the silence feels safe, in shared laughter that carries the weight of years, in the mutual understanding that no one here is trying to impress anyone. They're just trying to feel something again. And maybe that's where the most beautiful friendships begin, not in youth where everything is loud and fast, but in later life when we finally slow down enough to hear the truth in each other's voices. The truth that says, I see you. I've been through it too, and you're not alone anymore. You don't need 1,000 people. You need a few real ones. People who call you just to hear your voice, who remember the stories that matter, who hold space when you're struggling and cheer when you're strong, who show up, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. And when you find them, you'll begin to understand something else that no one tells you. The second half of life is not about decline. It's about depth. It's about peeling away the layers of performance, duty, and distraction, and arriving at what's real. And often, what's most real is who you are in relationship to others. Not what you can give them, but how you see them, how you allow yourself to be seen. Maybe that's what it means to belong, not to be surrounded, but to be held, in spirit, in story, in silence. So ask yourself, when was the last time you let someone truly see you? Not the you that's capable, or competent, or always composed, but the one who still aches, still dreams, still wonders if it's too late to begin again, because it's not. And somewhere out there, maybe just a few miles away, or maybe behind a screen, someone's wondering the same thing, wondering if there's a place for them now, wondering if they'll ever feel truly connected again, wondering if they're the only one who feels like a ghost in their own life. And just maybe, you're meant to find each other, not by accident, but by choosing to step into the unknown one more time, to reach, to ask, to risk. Sometimes the hardest part isn't being alone, it's explaining why you are. People ask, how are you? And you answer out of habit, fine, keeping busy. You know how it is, but they don't. Not really. They don't know what it feels like to scroll through your contacts and hesitate to call anyone. Not because you don't have names, but because you're not sure who would really understand, who wouldn't just change the subject, who wouldn't offer quick solutions to what isn't a problem, but a quiet ache that doesn't have a name. And the older you get, the harder it becomes to admit this, because people expect you to have it figured out by now, to be stable, grateful, settled. But what if you're not? What if, underneath the life you've built, there's still an unnamed hunger for depth, for closeness, for meaning? And what if that hunger isn't a sign of something missing, but a sign of something awakening? You begin to notice things others overlook. How people talk without really listening. How gatherings feel more like performances than conversations. How easy it is to be surrounded and still feel invisible. It's not bitterness, it's awareness. You've lived long enough to recognize the difference between attention and presence, between noise and connection, between being liked and being understood. And maybe that's the first gift of this stage in life. Clarity that lets you walk away from shallow friendships without guilt. Clarity that lets you stop explaining yourself to people who never really saw you. Clarity that draws you toward those few souls who carry a similar fire. Quiet, steady, and hard to find. But even with clarity, the path isn't always easy, because building something real, at this age, requires humility. You're no longer the young version of yourself who believed friendship came easily. You now know it takes time. It takes courage. It takes opening doors you've kept locked for years, and it begins with small acts of bravery. Showing up to a local group where you know no one, reaching out to someone you lost touch with, just to say, I've been thinking of you. Volunteering for something that matters. Not to be productive, but to feel purposeful again. At first, it may feel awkward, lonely even, like walking into a room full of people speaking a language you barely remember. But stay through the discomfort, through the voice that tells you you're too old for this, through the fear that whispers, no one here will understand. Because connection is not built in a moment. It's built in layers, in the second conversation, in the small gesture, In the quiet realization that someone remembered your name, your story, the little detail you didn't think mattered. And slowly, if you're patient, it begins to happen. The walls you didn't know you had start to soften. The silence you used to fill with distractions now invites reflection. And one day, almost without noticing, you'll be laughing with someone new. And it won't feel forced. It will feel like home. Not the home you live in, but the home you carry in your heart. The one that only comes alive in the presence of those who see you, fully, and stay. And here's the truth. You're not the only one searching. There are others, many others, navigating this same invisible terrain. Others who smile politely while carrying loneliness in their chest. Others who've spent too long pouring into people who never poured back. Others who want what you want, but don't know where to find it. And maybe they're just waiting for someone to go first, to speak honestly, to stay a little longer in the conversation, to ask real questions, to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here, and I see you. It doesn't take much. Sometimes a shared interest becomes a shared truth. A small act becomes a bridge, and a single "me too" can open a door you thought was permanently closed. But you have to choose it. You have to choose to believe that connection is still possible, that you are still worth knowing, that your story, your presence, your very being still carries weight, because it does. You are not a background character in someone else's life. You are still the author of your own. And in this chapter, the story doesn't have to be about what you've lost. It can be about what you're building, not a network, not a performance, but a circle. A quiet, sacred circle of people who get it. People who will remember your birthday. Not because Facebook reminded them, but because they wrote it down. People who will sit with you in your mess and not try to fix it. People who will call, not because they need something, but because they missed your voice. This kind of belonging doesn't come quickly, but it does come, if you're willing to show up for it. And when it does, something shifts again. You stop asking, where do I belong? And start saying, I'm glad I stayed long enough to find this. Because suddenly, you're not drifting anymore. You're anchored in laughter, in ritual, in trust. In a tribe that might not be loud or large or flashy, but is real, steady, true. And in that, there's something more powerful than happiness. There's peace. Peace is subtle. It doesn't make announcements. It doesn't need applause. It just settles into your bones one day, like a silence that no longer feels empty. That's what happens when you find your people. You stop bracing yourself for disappointment. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop looking at the clock during social events, counting down until you can leave. Because you're no longer performing. You're just being, breathing, existing in the company of others who don't require you to shrink, to explain, to pretend. There's no need for masks here. No need to hide the parts of yourself that feel too much or not enough. You are allowed to be whole, even when that wholeness includes your broken places. And in their presence, you begin to heal in ways you didn't know you needed. Not through dramatic breakthroughs or long confessions, but through the simple grace of being accepted, unedited. That's how the soul repairs itself, through the mirror of real connection. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's found in shared silence. Two people sitting side by side, watching the world go by, not needing to fill the space with words, just knowing they're not alone. Sometimes it's a hand on your shoulder, a knowing glance across the room, a laugh that bubbles up from somewhere deep where you forgot joy could live. Sometimes it's just someone saying, I get it, and meaning it. And little by little, your heart softens. You begin to trust again. You begin to show up more fully. You begin to offer the same presence to others that was once offered to you. That's how a support system forms, not with declarations, but with consistency, with showing up again and again, especially when life is messy, because real connection isn't built in perfect moments. It's built in the ordinary ones, the late-night talks, the unexpected visits, the quiet check-ins, and it's in those moments that a community becomes something more than a group of people. It becomes a refuge, a place where you can set down the weight you carry, where your silence is respected and your voice is heard, where you're allowed to be in progress, not just polished. And in that space, you begin to remember something vital, that you were never meant to do this alone. We live in a world that praises independence, strength, self-reliance, and yes, there's value in standing on your own feet. But there's a deeper wisdom in knowing when to lean and when to let others lean on you. Because real strength is not isolation. Real strength is interdependence. It's knowing that you are part of something larger than yourself, that your presence matters, not just because of what you do, but because of who you are. And when you embrace that truth, you begin to move differently. You listen more closely. You see people more clearly. You stop judging others for not having it all together, because now you know how much it takes just to keep going some days. You become a safe place. And in becoming that for others, you become that for yourself. That's the strange alchemy of belonging. It changes you. It unearths parts of you that were buried beneath decades of survival, of routine, of roles you had to play. It brings you back to something more essential. Not what you do, not what you own, but who you are when you're not trying so hard. And maybe that's why, after 50, everything starts to shift. Because time begins to feel different. You stop chasing what doesn't nourish you. You start noticing the people who bring you peace just by being near. And slowly, you make space for them. You carve out time, even when life is full. You prioritize connection, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. This matters. This is what makes life bearable, beautiful, real. And in doing so, something even deeper happens. You begin to forgive yourself for the years you spent too busy, too closed, too afraid. You forgive yourself for the people you didn't hold on to, for the connections you let wither, for the times you chose silence instead of vulnerability, because now you understand. You were surviving. You were doing your best with what you knew. And now, you know better. Now, you have the clarity to choose differently, to build slower, deeper, truer, to look someone in the eye and say, "You matter to me," without hesitation, without fear of rejection, without needing to be cool or clever or strong, just real, because real is what we crave, especially now. And the beautiful thing about real connection is that it doesn't expire. It doesn't get weaker with age. If anything, it becomes more powerful, because at this stage of life, you bring something younger hearts don't always have: perspective. You've seen how quickly things change, how fragile everything is. The value of a steady hand, of a voice that doesn't rush, of a presence that says, "Stay, you're not alone." And that presence, that calm center, it's a gift you can offer others. You are no longer just someone seeking connection. You are someone who can be the connection. For someone younger, for someone struggling, for someone lost in the same silence you once knew so well. Because sometimes all it takes is one person who shows up, one person who remembers, one person who says you're not invisible, and just maybe, that person is you. But connection doesn't maintain itself. Even the strongest roots need water. Even the oldest friendships need tending. And that's where many get it wrong. They believe once a bond is formed, it will endure without effort. That presence in the past guarantees presence in the future. That shared memories are enough to carry two people forward, no matter what. But life isn't that kind. It pulls us in different directions. It fills our calendars, clouds our minds, buries our intentions beneath 1,000 obligations. One missed call becomes a week of silence. One postponed meeting becomes a season apart. And suddenly, the closeness once taken for granted becomes a memory. Distant, dusty, fading in the corners of the mind. That's why relationships like gardens must be visited often. Not just when you need something. Not just when life slows down, but especially when it doesn't. Because connection isn't about grand gestures. It's about the quiet consistency of care. A message that says, "I'm thinking of you." A voice note in the middle of a busy day. A visit, even when the timing is inconvenient. The act of reaching out, especially when nothing's wrong, because you understand that bonds grow not only through crisis, but through presence. And sometimes, through silence too, because not all friendships need constant conversation. Some thrive in the comfort of knowing they're still there, like a lighthouse on the horizon, unmoving, unwavering, quietly reminding you you are not alone in this sea. But even lighthouses need maintenance. Even the strongest people need reminders that they matter. So you show up, you check in, you ask how their heart is, not just what they've been doing. You leave space for honesty, for mess, for the parts they don't show the rest of the world. And when they do open up, you listen, not to respond, not to fix, just to be there, just to say, with your presence, you're safe here. Because the greatest gift you can offer someone is your undivided attention. In a world full of noise and distraction, few things are more rare or more healing. And in giving that gift, you receive it too. You begin to see others not as roles or labels, but as stories in motion. Complex, beautiful, incomplete, just like you. And that recognition breeds something deeper than friendship. It breeds belonging, not the kind of belonging that depends on approval, not the kind that requires you to fit in, dress the part, or share the same opinions, but the kind that says, you don't have to earn your place here. You already have it. Because real belonging isn't about being the same. It's about being seen. And when you're seen, truly seen, something changes inside you. You stop performing. You stop shrinking. You stop chasing the ever-moving goalposts of being enough. You start to relax into your own skin. You start to speak more honestly. You start to laugh louder, cry more freely, love more deeply, because finally, you feel safe. And safety isn't a small thing, especially after 50, after years of being strong for others, after decades of keeping it together, after a lifetime of being who you needed to be to survive. Safety becomes sacred, a space where the armor can fall, where the voice doesn't tremble, where your presence is not a transaction, but a welcome. That's what your tribe becomes. Not just a group, not just acquaintances, but a circle of hearts that hold you when the world is too loud, that remember who you are when you forget, that remind you your story still matters, even, especially now. And in that space, you find something else you didn't realize you lost. Purpose. Because we often think purpose is tied to doing. Careers, titles, goals. But with time, many of those roles fade. Children grow, jobs end. Achievements gather dust. And we're left wondering, what now? But real purpose lives in connection. In being a witness to someone's life. In showing up for others not as a savior, but as a companion, in holding space for stories, pain, joy, and change. You don't need a stage to be important. You don't need a plan to be valuable. You just need to be present, consistently, genuinely, and slowly. That becomes your offering to the world. Your presence, your steadiness, your willingness to sit in the quiet with someone who doesn't have the words yet. Because the older we get, the more we realize that very few things matter more than that, and still, we resist. We tell ourselves it's too late, that everyone already has their circle, that starting new friendships now would be awkward or pointless. But that voice, it lies. It doesn't know the quiet ache that lives in so many hearts. It doesn't see the people longing for depth but trapped in shallow routines. It doesn't understand that, for someone out there, your voice, your story, your very presence could be the difference between silence and hope. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Send the message, make the call, join the group, walk into that room where you know no one, and stay long enough to be surprised. Because connection doesn't always come with sparks. Sometimes it begins with a shared glance, a kind smile, a conversation about nothing that somehow makes you feel everything. Sometimes all it takes is a first step, and if no one else takes it, maybe it's meant to be you. And then one day, without even realizing it, something inside you shifts. You're sitting at a table with people you didn't know a year ago. There's laughter, not forced, but flowing. There's a silence between words, but it feels warm, not empty. You look around and realize, I'm not performing anymore. I'm just here. And that's enough. And that feeling, It's hard to describe. It's not dramatic, not loud. It's something quieter. Like a gentle exhale after years of holding your breath. You didn't chase it, you built it. Slowly, quietly, through choices that looked small but carried the weight of intention. And now you carry something different in your posture. Not pride, not certainty, but presence. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to fix or prove or impress. You just need to keep showing up. Because that's how trust is built. Not through perfection, but through presence. And when that presence is mirrored, when someone sits across from you and simply says, "I see you," a part of you that had gone quiet stirs again. The part that remembers joy without purpose, conversations without masks, days without loneliness. That part doesn't die with age. It only goes into hiding, waiting to be invited back. And now it begins to emerge. You smile more, you soften, you listen differently. You begin to offer space not just for others, but for yourself, to rest, to feel, to stop rushing. Because you've begun to understand something most people miss until the very end. We are not meant to do this life alone. Not when it's easy, not when it's hard, especially not when it's quiet. And so your priorities change, not because someone told you to, but because life whispered something deeper. That time is no longer about how much you can do, but how fully you can be. That success isn't how far you climb, but how deeply you connect. That legacy isn't what you leave behind, but who you walk with while you're still here. So now, you guard your time differently. You choose where you spend your energy. You step away from what drains and move toward what nourishes. You stop chasing people who don't see you and start tending to those who do. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because you've earned the right to choose peace, to walk away from noise, to protect the quiet joy of being seen and seeing others in return. And with that choice comes a new kind of freedom. Not the freedom of youth, wild and untamed, but the freedom of age, rooted and calm. The kind that knows not everything needs to be said. The kind that understands silence as a language. The kind that no longer fears solitude, but recognizes it as the space where the soul breathes. And in that breathing, something settles. Not a conclusion, not an ending, but a rhythm that says, this is life now. Not perfect, not polished, but honest and whole. And maybe that's what we were always looking for. Not answers, not certainty, just a place where we could be real, with others, with ourselves, with the passing of time. So if you're still wondering where to begin, maybe it starts here. Not with a plan, but with a pause, a breath, a question left unanswered, hanging in the quiet night like a lantern in the dark. Who in your life truly sees you? And more importantly, who are you willing to see?